You know, like
It's quite formal, isn't it?
when people have been on those courses and they do the hands of truth,
No.
where they say, so, and they bring their hands together, the fingertips touch, as in, I'm honest and sincere.
It reminds me of Smithers from The Simpsons.
That's it, Smithers.
Smithers.
Good, well, I think that set the tone.
I agree.
Right, well, we may as well kick off.
Let's do it.
Hello, dear listener. So we are here in the studio with Shani from PerfectTed, and we're going to touch on so many things today at speed. Matcha, startups, Dragon's Den, lifelong learning, career changes, how to get your stuff into supermarkets. Anything else we're going to talk about?
I think you covered everything.
Right, but you have to keep me honest now to make sure we tick all those off for our dear listener. So Shani, you've come in, tell everyone who you are.
Well, thank you for that intro and thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. Yeah, I'm Shani Higgs. I'm head of sales at PerfectTed, and we are all about spreading positive energy through our matcha products. And I joined the business 3 years ago. I've been working in FMCG challenger brands for 7 years. Prior to that, I was in financial services for 7 years for my sins. Definitely in the better industry now. And yeah, just getting started really on this amazing matcha journey, which I'm sure we're going to dig into.
We are going to dig into, and I hope, dear listener, you're not driving at the moment. But if you are in reach of a computer or you're on your mobile, I would now scroll through the program notes and get up Shani's LinkedIn profile and click on PerfectTed. I'm just mentally counting to 3 while you do that, because I think let's start off with matcha drink. Because it's not often I get accused of being, finger on the pulse. But, when people show me Instagram and all I see are people traveling the world, matcha lattes. I had this matcha and strawberry cream concoction the other day.
Yep.
Quite tasty, I must admit. But I've also had some disgusting things that were like mashed up with, a brush and then tasted like grass and sawdust mixed together. Now, all those things come together, but matcha is hot, hot, hot. What is it? Why is it so cool?
So matcha in its purest form is just powdered green tea. And it actually originated in the 7th century in China, interestingly. A lot of people actually think that it originated in Japan because that's really where it's sourced from today. But actually it was discovered by a monk in China, and he brought it over to Japan. And he used to use it to help aid hours of meditation. Later on...
Really?
Yes. So then later on, it was adapted by samurais who would use it to help aid battle. So you have this amazing image of, amazing focus mixed with the energy and the power from the samurais. And today's consumers are using it to help them get through a long workday, get through a workout, but also maybe as a bit of an indulgent treat. You talked about the strawberries and cream. Indulgence is actually a really big theme in matcha. So you're probably familiar with the likes of Joe and the Juice, for example, who do the vanilla matcha lattes and the blueberry matcha lattes, and it's prevalent. But you're right, there's lots of different variants of matcha. Very similar to coffee. You can obviously go into a coffee shop and have a bad coffee, and you're just obviously never going to go into that coffee shop ever again, and you'll walk down the road to the better coffee shop where you'll keep going forever. Matcha is very similar, so there's lots of different grades. What is known as the best quality is ceremonial grade, and all that means...
Sorry, that just sounds so cool, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
I think I need to become a ceremonial grade editor. I like that.
I like that.
Ceremonial grade.
Add it to the bio. All that is, in its purest form, is just the first flush. So it's the youngest leaves being picked right at the beginning of the harvest. And that's what you get, more of that vibrant green. You're going to get a sweet umami flavour rather than a bitter grassy flavour. And the matcha that you would have tried where you've had a negative experience would have just been lower down the leaf. And so you would have got more shoots and stems, and that's where you're going to get more of that like bitter, sometimes grassy, people say as well, flavour. And yeah, we're definitely not about that. We're all about the ceremonial grade matcha. We're all about quality, but a big focus for us is making matcha accessible. And today we're in pretty much every retailer, bar the discounters, but also in leading coffee chains like Joe and the Juice, Black Sheep Coffee, and Café Nero and more.
Nice. And the packaging, small p rather than specific design, is similar to something we're used to in the market with the growth of, canned energy drinks on the one hand to, the kombuchas and so on. So it's as if the category overall has been growing where people are expecting healthy-ish, but also a bit indulgent, premium quality in a can that is portable but also consumable. So it's as if you've come into that sector rather than the coffee shop or artisanal matcha areas.
Yeah, what's interesting is we started off with energy drinks first. And
All right.
the reason for that is because the founders wanted to launch matcha latte. So just to give you a bit of background on the story, Marissa, Teddy and Levi all met at university in America. Marissa is from New York, Teddy and Levi are from London, but they went over to the States to study. Teddy and Levi are brothers, and then Marissa and Levi started dating at university, and today they are married, so we are a family
Well,
business.
thank God it worked out well.
They actually only got married last year, so yeah, it was the business has been going for almost 4. So very, very happy about that. But Marissa has ADHD and anxiety, and she was drinking copious amounts of Red Bull and coffee to obviously get through the long study hours. And then a friend said to her, "You can't go on like this anymore. Have you tried matcha?"
Oh, interesting.
She'd never heard of matcha before. So she started drinking it, and in her words, it quite literally changed her life. And Teddy and Levi were playing Division 1 soccer at the time, so she then introduced matcha to them to help them with their energy during their games. They loved it, fell in love with it. And then they moved back to London and started working, and they just realised that matcha just did not exist in the UK. You couldn't get it in a coffee shop.
And which year was this? That's
This would have been around
2020?
It would have been just before that,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, around, actually, it would have been 2020. Yes, around that time, 2020, 2021. And it really didn't exist in the coffee shops. You couldn't find matcha in the supermarket apart from maybe like a niche health independent store. And even then, the brands weren't really appealing to, say like the millennials, the Gen Zs. There was no one there really leading from like a brand element.
Yeah.
And on top of that, Marissa was like, okay, well, I'll just turn to, a ready to drink, an energy drink format. And then she would go to the fridge fixture and say, there's no energy drinks there that are appealing to me as a woman who is health conscious. There's nothing on the shelf that appeals to me. So initially they thought, well, let's try and put a matcha latte in a Tetra Pak. And
yes, I'm feeling that.
Yeah. Actually, a couple of brands have tried to do that. So they were all ready to go with the production. And then last minute, there was a shortage on Tetra Paks.
Okay.
And as a small supplier, they obviously were not prioritised.
Right.
And that's when actually they pivoted to the energy drinks and used matcha as an ingredient to help with obviously the energy piece, so the caffeine, but with that angle of slow release, better focus, so more functional energy. And that's where it started.
But the way it's moved is much more, if you like, claiming an identity now rather than just fitting in as a me too. So, from the packaging, the marketing, there's a much clearer articulation of the fact it's health, but also energy giving. And, when you hear people, the founders in particular, talking about it, it seems part of a bigger mission in life to make, the world a better place.
Definitely. It's a big focus for them. And I think what is really interesting is we have a lot of, obviously, our core demographic is 18 to 35-year-old working professionals, but you've probably seen in the news as well the amount of people that have been diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
There is a massive backlog in diagnosis. There's also a massive backlog in actually access to medication right now.
But also that medication, it's not take 3 aspirins. It's here's a spectrum of possible doses at possible times, which you have to work out yourself. So
exactly.
With due respect to actually, medically qualified people, my impression is that there's a lot more, if you like, patient engagement in the management of ADHD And so this is where something like a matcha would fit in as part of an overall approach.
Exactly that. Every day it is a bit of a journey of trying to figure out what is the best medicine, and so that is a bit of a process. But again, as you say, this is where PerfectTed can fit into that everyday life. But we get so many people emailing us, whether it's parents saying, my child just went off to university and they were drinking loads of Red Bull, but now I buy your 4 packs and I send it off to them so that they can have that while they're studying. Or people that have had health scares or health issues where they can't tolerate caffeine from traditional caffeine sources. And that's where we personally feel very proud of our work.
Okay, I'm going to pause us now because I think those who are matcha aware are saying get on with it, and everybody else has caught up that your matcha is a big thing now, so that's great. I want to jump very quickly into Dragon's Den. So as people will see from the notes or may already know, that the founders went on Dragon's Den and got a full strike where they all wanted to invest, etc., etc. So I watched the video of that, which was, very life affirming. But what was interesting was how quickly everyone got the product and got the opportunity, even though this was a number of years ago when, they didn't have the benefit of the hindsight that we have. So maybe just give us an update on how that Dragon's Den presence and the input has helped accelerate the brand.
Yeah, it was honestly life-changing for the business. It completely changed the business overnight. It catapulted us, into the households of millions of British consumers. It was an amazing evening. We actually, on the same week, launched into the Tesco meal deal.
Nice.
Yeah, which sounds like it would be perfect timing, but actually our stock was sitting in most of the storerooms in the stores. So behind the scenes, it was actually just me and the founders running into all the Tesco's in London to get the stock out ahead of the episode so we could make sure that people would find the product when they saw us on TV and then went to our website, and we had now available in the Tesco meal deal. So,
but of course you didn't know until they went into the room that it was going to be such a success, televisually speaking. So until that morning, just getting into Tesco must have been a pretty big high point.
It was a really massive high point. And yeah, it was incredible. But it was that, okay, now we need to make sure that it was just a real moment of truth, because we had to make sure, okay, we're going to drive people there. Is it definitely going to work? Are people going to love the product? Luckily, they did. We're still in the Tesco meal deal today, over 2 years later. So that's always a good sign. But it's really interesting because one of the metrics we use for just interest in matcha generally, we'll use Google search trends. I don't know if this is something that you've used before, but if you look over a 5-year period, that night of the Dragon's Den episode was one of the highest peaks of interest in matcha in the UK.
Nice.
So it did do exactly what it was meant to do in educating British consumers on what matcha is. Obviously now today it's a lot higher, particularly in 2025. The growth of matcha has just massively surged, but it did really help.
But I thought, when I looked back on it, it seemed as if you were introducing matcha into a world that was already kombucha aware, and you were kind of the new drink on the block. Whereas now there's a different problem, which is that there are so many sweet and sickly matcha adjacent things. I was down in Borough Market the other day and we were having a matcha latte, and there were matcha brownies there as well. And so there are all these things that are much more sugared, much more treat, which aren't the same ethos as your brand. So are you now finding you're saying, yeah, we're matcha but, or we're matcha plus? How has that changed as the world has become much more matcha aware?
Have you ever been to Japan?
Sadly not. You're really now rubbing salt into one of my regrets.
You have to go. If you went, you would see that matcha just isn't consumed in a drink format in the cafes. It's in everything. My particular favourite is a matcha soft serve, but it's in the food.
Wow.
It's everywhere. So I think as we start to see the matcha category develop, we are going to see it show up in a lot more use cases, which we think is fantastic. I think looking at that core demographic, which is females 18 to 35, yes, she might want to start with just her original matcha latte in the morning, but maybe in the afternoon, she does want something that's a bit more of an indulgent pick-me-up. And that's where, like, say, our strawberries and cream matcha latte might come up, or even, say, the matcha brownie, which, in my opinion, sounds amazing. But we are going to start to see that pop up a lot more. But that's a good thing. The whole thing that's really underpinning it is that energy piece. I mean, ultimately, we're selling the most consumed drug in the world, which is caffeine. And that's the thing that's going to keep them going, whether it's going to their workout class, or maybe it's to aid them through the workday, or maybe it's to go with their friend to catch up over a matcha latte. That energy piece is what is underpinning it all.
Interesting. Now, we're talking about the mirror, if you like, from Japan, which is matcha infused. You seem to have resisted the brand bloat so far. Is that on purpose, or are you just biding your time until you have matcha merchandise and you extend it to different categories? What's the sort of growth plan from now? Because just using publicly available numbers, I was watching a video that Stephen Bartlett did, one of your obviously dragon investors, and he was saying, blah blah blah. We've gone from 9,000 a month to, I think it was 20 million a year or something. So I don't know what the exact numbers are, but they're still pretty enormous. So where next? What's the what are the growth vectors for you now that you would, by all measures, are a very successful niche product?
Yeah, so we started off with the energy drinks almost 4 years ago. And then the next evolution of that was selling just the raw matcha powder ingredient to cafes and then putting it into retail pouches. In the last year and a half, we've expanded that range massively. So one of the leverages of working with cafes as well as retailers is that we get access to data in cafes where a lot of these trends seem to start. So we could see that actually 80% of matcha lattes consumed in a cafe were flavoured. So that's when we kind of had that aha moment of we should extend into a flavoured matcha powder range. And so we released our vanilla, strawberry, and then this year our blueberry matcha powder. And the other barrier was, okay, people are interested in matcha, but they're maybe a bit intimidated by it. They maybe don't know how to make it. So how can we make it as easy as possible? And that's when we created sachets. They're already pre-measured. And all you need to do is pour it in with the milk, and then you just whisk it and it's done. And then our matcha Nespresso pods, which were particularly difficult to
I was to say, I
make.
saw those and I was thinking, because as a coffee addict myself, then looking at things like pressure, micron pours, and flow rates, and it did cross my mind as I looked at the website, thinking, I wonder how they engineered these.
With people who are much more experienced than we are, thank God. But it was really difficult, and we had a launch with Holland Barrett, and it was a very tight timeline. So from idea to shelf, it was 9 months. So
Wow.
if anybody who works in food and drink and PD pipeline knows that is rapid. And we were a really small team, so it was like me and the founders and then one MPD person working at scale to kind of get this made. But yeah, if you look very closely, I have a lot of grey hairs from it all. But, right now it's performing incredibly well. The customer feedback is great. So we just keep evolving that as our flavours come in. And then our recent launch was actually our matcha lattes in a can. And we launched that in April, and it just exploded. It just flew off the shelves. In month 1, we doubled the hurdle rate in the category. So
Wow.
that is really interesting, because it's showing that, yes, people still obviously want their matcha in a cafe, and that's like a nice treat, but there is definitely demand for that on the go, grab and go consumption in stores.
And so let's, if you like, reach the website now and start talking a bit more about you. So tell us about your role. So you've got these partnerships with large supermarkets, never easy to get. Once you get them, then the real work starts. So that could take up several jobs. You've got the website, you've got product development. So I'm feeling there's a lot of work in what's essentially still a very small team. So just give us a little thumbnail sketch of how you would describe your job to an outsider.
Yeah, so when I joined the business, I was the first employee. I think today we have about 35 people, and there's somebody new joining every single week, which is amazing, but we're already running out of desk space. So that's the challenge. But we kind of span across the main channels, obviously retail, which is our biggest channel. That's about 40%. And then out of home, e-com and export, which is actually split 20% roughly currently at year to date. So,
And what do you include in out of home?
so that would be anything that is your cafes, your restaurants, your bars. Like I said, we work with a lot of the leading coffee chains. We also export with them. So with Joe and the Juice, where they're global matcha suppliers. So that expands across the Middle East, US, Europe. But also offices, for example. So anywhere where there is a barista bar, you will find our powders.
Oh, interesting. Okay, good. So that's a shape, if you like, of the sales and the channels. But let's talk about you, because when I looked at your profile, which our diligent listener has already scanned by now, then they'll have picked up on the fact you have a non-traditional, non-conventional career path, which I'd like to explore a little. But maybe let's just start off with how you met the founders and became the first, if you like, the fourth person in the trio. How did that recruitment come about? Because it wasn't exactly a job ad, was there?
There was not. And actually, I don't think that they even knew that they were hiring at the time. But yeah, you're right. I have a bit of a non-traditional route into FMCG. As I said, I worked in financial services and insurance for 5 years before having my life epiphany and luckily making it into food and drink. But we actually met through an industry contact. So I was introduced to Marissa, and I just done this sort of like mini MBA with this industry contact. And I did the cohort 1, and Marissa and Teddy were doing the cohort 2. And so our mutual connection said, you should talk. So Marissa called me on a Sunday, and she said, I remember looking at their social media, and I said, oh, you must be a graphic designer if you're doing all the designs yourself, because they're incredible. And she said, oh no, we have private equity and consulting backgrounds, but I just taught myself how to do this. And I thought, okay, well, these people are generally, incredible if they can teach themselves how to do the branding of the can and everything else that went through it. So we just stayed in touch. We just hit it off right off the back, and we would hang out and just talk all things food and drink and do a lot of knowledge exchanging. And then after knowing each other for about 6 months, I got a call from the founders saying, can you meet us for a coffee? And I went and met them on a Saturday morning, and they said, we've had a think, and we just would love to offer you a job as our first employee as head of sales. And I was not expecting it at all. And they will joke, and it is publicly known, that I did at the time say, it's not a no, it's just a not right now, because I had just taken a job. I was fairly new to roll in, so I wanted to make sure that I sort of did my time there and gave it my best shot. But after a few more months, they came back around and said, okay, when are you going to stop being silly and join us? And I said, okay, well, if I'm in, I'm in. That's it. You're never getting rid of me. And 3 years later, I'm still here today. So it's been an amazing journey. But I always believed in them. And even at the time when I said it's not a right now, I said to them, I genuinely believe you can be the next Innocent Drinks. And it's not because of the product and the brand. Yes, that is amazing. But actually, it's the founders. And people often ask me when they're looking at joining a challenger brand, what should I be looking for? Should I take this leap? Should I go and work with a startup? Investors will often say, when they're looking at whether they want to invest in an FMCG challenger brand, they're not looking at the P&L, they're not looking at the products, they're looking at the founders. And are these people that they can bet on, that they want to bet on? And I always think that that's the way you should look at it. If you want to work for a challenger brand, do you respect the founders? Do you look up to them? Are they people that you would walk into a fire with? Are they the people that you want to go to battle with every single day? Because that is what being in a startup genuinely feels like. And so I knew that regardless of the product or brand that the founders, Teddy, Marissa and Levi, were selling, that they were going to be successful no matter what. So I always had that belief in them from the beginning.
So I think my response to that is game sees game. So, if I were looking at you, I think, wow, she's impressive. You've done all of these things. And also you've been a founder and set up your own business in the space as well. So it's not like you're wide-eyed and said, oh, look, they're great. So let's start off with, if you like, a comparison of good people meeting good people. When you see people who are doing well, what is it you look at them and think, oh, yes, I've done it myself, but the things I see in you guys or in the business are A, B, and C. So maybe just distill that for us so we can see that if you like, when good people see in other good people, what are those, I don't know, attributes or values or capabilities that you thought, oh yes, that's going to work?
So yes, when I was in COVID, I was unemployed, and so I decided to start my own food brand, because what else was I going to do with my time?
Yes, exactly. What else?
And I decided to start an overnight oats brand, and it was amazing. It was obviously COVID, couldn't do anything, so I just sat at home and wrote my business plan, and I did my recipe development, and then it did kind of go to the next level of like finding a manufacturer, getting some money in, getting a business loan. I took it to that stage. I'm so glad that I did that, because it has really taught me what it takes to be an entrepreneur, and it did allow me to think in that headspace. When you feel like everything's on the line, and on the other side, there is nothing that will stop you from getting the job done. So you ask, what are the attributes? It's that resilience, just like that ability to break down walls and keep finding the solution. And the buck, always think like the buck stops with you. So we have virtues in our business. We call them virtues because virtues are what you do, whereas values are what you say. So our virtues are in the acronym of PRICE, which is progress, resilience, intensity, consistency, and entrepreneurialism, which is always the one that people...
Oh, that's a tricky one.
It's a tricky one. Everyone always struggles with that. But the reason why we have that last one in is because we want everybody in the business to think like they're a founder of the business. And actually, everybody is part of the EMI scheme after a year, so they are owners in the business. And the founders really want them to feel like that. So if you're, building our convenience channel, it's like that's your mini business within a business. And I want you to think like that. I want you to find solutions. I want you to think outside the box and break down those walls and come to us with suggestions of how we're going to be the next big energy drink brand, how we're going to be the world's largest matcha brand, and what's going to take us to that next level.
Yeah. Now, over lunch, we were talking a bit about process, and I felt I knew you well enough to explain how much I love a good process. But, there's a challenge here, which is sometimes people come in and think, if I move the pile from point A to point B, I've done my job. Whereas this is the opposite of what we're saying, which is you own a result whatever it takes. And I was looking at one of the articles you wrote about being scrappy and, never giving up. It doesn't have to be pretty so long as it's effective. So I'm slightly disappointed that scrappy isn't in those virtues. But, maybe talk a little bit more about, that approach you've had to work, especially around how you keep learning new things in a role that's developed in a sector that's developing.
Yeah, maybe we should change the virtues to Sprice or something.
Sprice. You heard it here first.
It's, for a challenger brand, it's quite interesting. And I think particularly being employee number one, a lot of people in an early stage challenger brand, they really only love the 0 to 1. I think I'm probably a little bit weird where I do love the 0 to 1, but now I'm really loving the next level up, how do we get to the £100 million? And it is just like constant, you're right, processes. At the beginning, you're terrified of processes because they slow you down.
Yeah.
As you start to bring more people in, you realise actually it is going to enable you to speed up and you need them there. So we've got very good at processes now, still some way to go, but it is just that constant learning, adapting, and feedback. We're very good at, okay, if we see that there is a problem, let's get into a room and find a solution very quickly. Let's not let it get too big. And that is one of the benefits of being a challenger brand, is you can move quickly to solve those things very quickly. So yeah, I think in our instance, it's we don't look to other companies and we don't look to other brands to try and see how we should get from A to B and B to C. We are trying to constantly reinvent the wheel. We're trying to break the mold. So we do things really differently. And a good example of that is if you've ever looked at our social media, and I've actually done this exercise before where I've looked at Red Bull's social media and Monster's social media, and I'll kind of cover up their logos. And I'll ask people, okay, can you tell whose is which? And most of the time you can't, because it's very similar in terms of it's, extreme sports. It's very, it's mountain climbing. It's very focused on an athlete and a very extraordinary type of person. Whereas if you were to look at our marketing, initially we were very focused on telling the story of the founders and really breaking the mold. Or even if you look at a lot of challenger brands, they're very focused on like health benefits of a product and just calling out the USPs. Whereas the founders would tell the story of, come with us as our manufacturing machine breaks down for the day. And people love that because we're taking our consumers on a journey and bringing them into the company and watching as we grow and as we scale. And I think that's massively contributed to our success, because our customers feel like they own a little piece of us in a way. And so, I think we've always had that mentality, and we'll keep having that mindset to help us scale.
Interesting. And as you scale and you're bringing people on board, what is your mental checklist of skills and attributes for people who are going to thrive in your business, not so much looking back, but looking forward?
Yeah, so I have this thing that I call skill and will. Came from my amazing business coach, which I use every day. But essentially at the beginning, you hire a lot on will. Do you have passion for the brand? Do you love the brand? That's enough. Okay, we'll take you in. But as the business has obviously started to grow, we need to bring in experts, people that know more than us to help us get to where we want to get to the next level. And that's when that skill element comes in. They still need the will.
Right.
There's a sweet spot. It's really hard to find because
how do you get that balance?
It is difficult. I would say that as the business has grown, and as we're seen more in the stores, and as we become a more established brand, we have been able to attract people who are from the Danons and the PepsiCos of the world that want to really believe in what they're building, and also want a bit more autonomy, and they really want to build something from the ground up. So we have been really fortunate in the talent that we've attracted, but that has come from building a brand that I think people realise that we're not going anywhere anytime soon. So they do have confidence in us. But there's a sweet spot, because it's really hard building a challenger brand. When we're sitting in that Tesco meal deal, we're up against the Coca-Colas of the world. So that is the most competitive space to be probably in the world in terms of retail space. So, you have to be so passionate about what we're doing, and we have to believe in what we're doing, because you are, you're going to have to drive the business forward. And it's harder to hire for when you're talking about what kind of skills. Again, there's we actually said this earlier, we were talking about attitude. And attitude is so important, because that is going to be 95% of the work, right? If you're the type of person that comes with a solution, you're proactive, you're being entrepreneurial in your mindset and thinking about solutions to problems. But obviously the skill set does really vary depending on the department. In sales, I'd be looking for somebody who's an excellent communicator, amazing attention to detail. I can't stress enough how
Isn't it
important that
funny
is.
how this comes up time and again, and attention to detail plus passion to get in the first place? These are things that somehow become superpower.
They are. And we're really lucky. We have that in abundance in the business, but we do set that example from the top down. So we're fortunate in the team that we have. But I would say hiring and people management in general is definitely the most challenging part of the job.
Yeah. It's always tough when you're training somebody, and then when they get better than you and do more than you could do, you think that was it. Great solution.
Yeah.
So we're in quite rapidly changing times. It's not often in an industry you have the technology changing as quickly as it is, customer tastes changing as quickly as they are, and then the established way of doing things, particularly in FMCG, going through an epochal change as well. So it's a time of opportunity, but also people aren't always entirely sure what the new rules are going to be. So as you're looking at, leaving the studio appropriately caffeinated and full of energy and positivity, what's on your agenda now for the next stage in the business? What's exciting you? What's going to change? What's the next thing? If we caught up in a year's time, you say, "Oh yeah, I was working on that, and here we are." What's changing?
It's getting matcha everywhere. I know that sounds so generic.
Matcha bubble bath.
Everywhere, everywhere. No, for me, my friends will say I'm completely obsessed because if we go to a restaurant for brunch or if I'm walking into a gym, I'm like, why is there no matcha here?
Yeah.
Because wherever there's coffee, there should be matcha. And what's interesting is when we look at the shopper profile from our retail data, we have two core demographics. So one is what you would expect, that 18 to 35 working professional. The second is actually parents who still have children that live at home.
Oh, talk me through that. I was listening to the words and I got to the end of the sentence and thought, I don't understand. Talk to me about that profile.
So parents whose children haven't fled the nest yet, so they're not quite at university.
But they need some energy.
But they need some energy. So what's interesting about this particular demographic is that the children are on TikTok. They're seeing all this green stuff that you referenced that's going around on social media, and they'll see the trend and they want to recreate that cafe matcha latte experience at home.
Yeah.
But they'll say to our parents, "Look, Mum, can you go get that PerfectTed that's on TikTok at your local Tesco?" And so those parents are going in and buying that product, and then their children are recreating it at home. The reason why that is so relevant is because that is the next wave of consumers.
Because they've gone from proxy purchasers to being the consumer.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. So when we're looking at coffee shops, and a question that we get asked is this a fad? Is matcha a trend? And it's truly not. And the reason for that is because of the energy piece. It's got caffeine in it. If I were to say to you, "Oh, is coffee a trend? Is it a fad?" I think I would be laughed out the room. So again, that next wave of consumers, they're going to expect to see that in their cafe, in every cafe, not just matcha, but good quality matcha. They're going to understand.
I think the quality is the key thing. So it's not just matcha-like. It is an authentic but high-quality one.
Exactly.
But 30 years ago, I was running an art gallery, and we were talking to this new company at the time, which became Pret a Manger. And we were saying, would you like to run a cafe in our gallery, so we could raise money, be a visitor amenity and so on. And I was chatting to their COO, and he was telling us their plans. We're going to have one at this end of the street, one at the other end. And I honestly said to him, I said, as a coffee lover, I said, "You're mad. Nobody needs that amount of coffee."
And yet here we are.
15 years later, I bumped into it again, and there was I was so totally wrong. So I'm just putting on the table now that, if there are 5 matcha stores per square foot in London, in 5 years' time, we heard it here first.
That's the future. That's where it's going. So no, you asked why I'm focusing on it. Honestly, we're just doing a massive push. I think it's so easy to be, in all the major supermarkets. Yes, we're in some amazing leading coffee chains. It would be easy for us. I'm the fastest growing tea brand. We're Europe's leading matcha brand. It would be so easy for us just to take a step back and maybe breathe and have a bit of a break. But actually that gives us more of a surge to carry on because there's more on the line, but also we see the opportunity that there is to go after. So it's about getting the right team in place to help open more doors, to bring matcha to the masses and help us with that overall goal, which is to make matcha as accessible as possible.
Great. Well, I'm sure there's a baseball cap that could be something to make matcha great again, but maybe we shouldn't go there. Shani, it's been fantastic talking to you, and a combination of, a great story about, a challenger brand, but also about a new category and so much around the values as well. It's been absolutely fascinating. So hopefully you'll come back and we can catch up again and see what the next stages turn out to be.
I look forward to it. We can go to one of the 4 matcha cafes on the road.
Well, let's open one here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks.
Thank you.